of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure, and Communities to order. As many of you know, once again, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are all aware. The webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to point out a few rules to follow. First off, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, as always, both the committee clerk and myself will do the very best we can to maintain the order of speaking for all members, whether you are participating virtually or in person. Members, pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee will now commence its consideration of the main estimates 2021-22. It's my pleasure now to introduce as well as welcome our witnesses. Appearing for the first hour, 3:30 to 4:30, we have the Honorable Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, as well as her, I would call her right arm, and sometimes both arms, Kelly Gillis. Kelly, great to see you again, the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. The second hour, between 4:30 and 5:30, we have witnesses from the Office of Infrastructure Canada. Kelly Gillis will continue to be with us, the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, as well as Natalie Bertrand, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Services, and Glenn Campbell, Assistant Deputy Minister, Investment Partnerships and Innovation, Alison O'Leary, the Assistant Deputy Minister, Program Operations and Communities, as well as Rural Economic Development, and finally, Gerard Peets, the Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy and Results. So with that, to all of you, welcome. It's great to have you out to the committee. And we're going to start off with Minister McKenna. Mr. McKenna, you now have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much to the chair and to committee members. It's great to be back in front of committee. I want to start by recognizing that I am on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples in my house. So hopefully no interruptions. You never know. I am certainly very pleased to be here to talk about the government's commitment to building back better, especially relevant as today is Earth Day. So happy Earth Day to everyone. It's really, as I say, about building the future we want, which is infrastructure is a key role. Also to talk about main and supplementary estimates to advance the government's national infrastructure plan. Of course, very happy to be joined by Kelly Gillis, my deputy minister. Well, COVID-19 has certainly reshaped so many aspects of our lives, including how we do committees, of course, also how we get around in our communities, how we connect with each other. The good news is we will get through the pandemic, but as we do that, we need to think about ways to build back better. En bâtissant le Canada que nous voulons,
by building the Canada we want with good jobs, a sustainable economy, cleaner air, and more inclusive communities where people want to live, work, and raise their families.
Mr. Freeland tabled Budget 2021, a plan that will help us conquer COVID-19 in the short term, punch our way out of the COVID-19 recession in the medium term, and build a more resilient and cleaner Canada. This plan will help parents, particularly women, return to the workforce with more affordable and accessible childcare, reaching $10 a day in the next 5 years. And I don't have to tell any of the parents here how important that is. It also invests in bold climate action, building on what we have already done and setting us on a path to reaching net zero emissions in 2050. Today on Earth Day, we acknowledge just how important climate action is, but I would say in my role, I think about that every single day and how infrastructure needs to help us tackle climate change and build more resilient communities. whether it's assessing the climate impacts of new roads or bridges or electrifying public transit and retrofitting buildings to become more energy efficient. As we build back better, we need to continue our fight against climate change. Every infrastructure decision is inevitably a climate decision too. In the case of infrastructure investments, they help create jobs, drive economic growth, tackle climate change, and build more inclusive communities. To do this successfully, we're seeking $6.8 billion in the 2021-2022 main estimates, $4.3 billion in grants and contributions to support 22 infrastructure programs, and $2.3 billion for the gas tax, now renamed the Building Canada Communities Fund, which I think is a way better name, assuming I got that right, all to ensure that communities across Canada have the money they need when they need it. We're also seeking an increase of $2.2 million through Supplementary Estimate C for 2020-2021. This funding will support the recent approval of the Strengthening Stewardship of Canadian Infrastructure, Long-Term Resourcing Strategy Treasury Board submission, which granted Infrastructure Canada permanent operating funding. And I can't tell you how exciting that makes me, because we definitely need permanent operating funding. I can see my deputy smile. The additional funding will enable the department to meet existing obligations, maintain operations, and meet the evolving infrastructure needs in Canada, including driving to net zero by 2050. That's what I want to talk a little bit more about today. To be honest, I've always hated the word infrastructure, and I'm not the only one. John Baird, a former Minister of Infrastructure, agrees with me. It's a made-up bureaucratic word that undersells the final product. Talk to someone about their new community center or finally being hooked up to high-speed broadband or taking an electric bus, and you realize it is so much more. Ce sont des projets qui déterminent.
It determines our quality of life and is critical for our economic growth, job creation, and combating the effects of climate change, especially now as we look towards recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Our resolve and spurred us to do more, to do it faster, and to do it more strategically. We've accelerated projects approvals under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and since March of last year, have approved nearly 3,100 projects, representing a federal investment of over $4.1 billion. That's projects in communities across the country. This serves as a testament of the progress we're making with our Investing in Canada plan. We know the plan is working. Canadians know the plan is working. They see the progress in their communities. The federal government has invested more than $81 billion for over 67,000 projects, with 90% of them completed or underway. That means 40% of the way into the plan, we've invested more than 40% of the funding. But it's about more than the plan. We're doing so much more that is being counted under the Investing in Canada plan. We're moving forward with universal broadband, green and inclusive community buildings, and many other initiatives that were not part of the plan's originally designed. Initiatives that help address issues raised by the pandemic, such as the COVID-19 Resilience Stream, the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, and new funding for ventilation, the latter of which will reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission by funding projects to improve ventilation for schools, hospitals, and other public buildings.
And initiatives that are helping us reach our climate targets, like the investments we're making in public transportation.
Mr. Justin Trudeau and I announced a federal plan to invest nearly $15 billion for new public transit infrastructure over the next 8 years. This funding includes a long-term strategy to deliver $3 billion annually for public transit beginning in 2026-2027. Since then, I've announced additional details around Canada's approach to public transit funding, including investments in 5,000 zero-emission buses and active transportation like cycling and walking paths, rural transit, and more. But we can't just build back better, we have to build back smarter. That's why we launched engagement on Canada's first ever national infrastructure assessment. We will rely on experts, data, and evidence to identify Canada's infrastructure needs and priorities out to 2050.
Wrap it up,
2021 is a year of change, and in Infrastructure Canada, we continue to look for innovative ways to do things better. Notre objectif est d'apporter.
Our goal is to make tangible improvements that contribute to better public transit improved connectivity, cleaner water, good jobs, and much more.
I hope a kid riding on a new subway line in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, or riding on an electric bus anywhere in the country, will look up at his mother and ask how it got built. And she will say, it's part of how we build back better from this terrible pandemic. We got through it, and now we're living this action. We know that through our historic investments in infrastructure, we're helping Canadians and their communities adapt and recover, get people working, and build a cleaner, inclusive, and more connected country for the future. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. Before I go to the questions, I just wanted to mention to the committee that we are going to probably close it up early in terms of the meeting itself today, because I do have a set of main estimates. I believe there's about 10 of them to be exact to vote on prior to adjourning the meeting. So we're probably going to veer from the agenda and go to those votes. Probably about 10 minutes left in the meeting, as well as also re-mention the fact of any comments that members may have on the reports that we're expecting to come back to committee. So with that, I also want to finally say before I go to Mr. Scheer that it seems when we do have the ministers out that we have sometimes some crossover in comments. I'll say it that way. May I request to members that we try and respect the interpreters and not talk over each other, because it makes it harder for the interpreters as well as it's not good for their ears. So with that, I would hope you would give that respect to those folks that are working in the back room. So with that, I'll start off with the Conservatives. Mr. Scheer, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, recently the Parliamentary Budget Officer told this committee that your department has so far refused to provide to him all the information regarding the infrastructure projects that you have claimed. In fact, he highlighted almost 9,000 projects that your department has been unable to verify. That was last month. Has your department been able to provide that information to the Parliamentary Budget Officer?
Minister.
Thank you very much to my critic for his question. We provided the Parliamentary Budget Officer with an itemized list of more than 33,000 projects that we fund directly, and another 20,000 projects we support through block funding, such as the Gas Tax Fund, as well as some CMHC projects. And let's be clear that part of the challenge is written by the Conservatives themselves. If you look at the 10-year agreement the Conservatives signed on the Gas Tax Fund in 2014, it does not require provinces to provide detailed reporting on each project or its outcomes. In fact, Quebec isn't required to do project-by-project reporting at all. I want to thank my team, Kelly, to the deputy, and to the whole infrastructure team who had to go across government, make sure that we reported on projects, and then go and find projects in provinces so that we could properly report. We need to fix this. That's something I am committed to, because we obviously need to get a full accounting. But let me tell you, go to any city across or town across the country, and they'll tell you how much these projects are making a difference in their communities.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Scheer.
So the Minister has been part of a government that has been in government for several years now. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has asked for this information. The Minister makes these claims. This is a very simple question. Just last month, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said there are over 8,500 projects this department has lost track of. So it's a very short question, and Mr. Chair, I hope the answer would be correspondingly short. Has this minister been able to provide the Parliamentary Budget Officer with the missing information?
Minister.
Let's be 100% clear. We have lost no projects. We have tracked all the projects, and we provided the information. And when it's time to renegotiate the 10-year agreements with provinces that were negotiated under the Conservatives, we will make sure everyone has to report on every single project, correcting the error made by the Conservatives.
So, thank you, Minister.
So you're saying that you have, so now you're telling us that you have provided this missing information to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Is that what you just said?
Minister.
We have provided information about all the projects, more than 33,000 projects that we fund directly, another 20,000 projects that we support through block funding. I'm happy to turn this over if you would, to my deputy. She can provide more information, because our department spent a lot of time getting all this information. Kelly, Deputy, yes. Would you like to say something?
You've made the claim, Minister. You've made the claim, Minister. You're directly contradicting what the Parliamentary Budget Officer told this committee just last month. You're asking Parliament for billions in new spending, and you can't keep track, you can't verify, and the Auditor General reported the same thing, that there's missing information, not able to track projects. So I just want to make crystal clear, you've now repeated it a couple times, every piece of information that Parliamentary Budget Officer has requested, you are now telling this committee that you have provided that to the Parliamentary
Ms.
Budget
Gillis, you want to answer
So,
that?
Mr. Chair, I would like to answer that. Yes, we have provided the Parliamentary Budget Officer with a complete list of information. Last June, I personally wrote the Parliamentary Budget Officer and provided a clear and detailed accounting of all of the projects, including the 33,000 projects where we get detailed information, as well as information related to the gas tax that we collected, as well as the 9,000 projects that you're referring to are from CMHC. They're not Infrastructure Canada projects, and they're related to transfer payments to the provinces and territories, that they do not get project by project information, but all of the claim information is subject to third-party confirmation and compliance with the bilateral agreements that they have with provinces and territories. It's related to investments in affordable housing. It's related to investments in shelters for victims of family violence, those in social housing. That is why they don't have detailed information, but that information was provided to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and we later confirmed, again, following up to make sure that they were clear on the information that was provided.
Mr.
To
Chair.
be clear, those were projects that your department claimed. So to say that they're now not infrastructure projects, that's part of the global amount that that the minister claimed. So you're
Ms.
telling
Gillis?
this
Can
committee.
I just like to confirm, these are not within Infrastructure Canada. They're not programs or projects within Infrastructure Canada. Within the overall plan for the Investing Canada, there are 21 departments, 93 programs. Within the 93 programs, one of the departments or one of the organizations is CMHC. They have a number of programs that are related to the plan overall, and they are accountable for managing, executing, and implementing the plans with the programs within the plan that are under their responsibility.
Mr. Chair.
So these projects, you say that they're not infrastructure, but they come from the overall Investing in Canada plan. These were added to the list when this government made claims about the projects that they were making. This is why the Parliamentary Budget Officer asked for the information in the first place. Now you're telling this committee that these are things that you paid out for these, but that you don't track, and that you are unable to provide the types of information that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has asked for.
Chair, I'd like to just be 100% clear. We have provided the information on all the projects, but you know what? The big question Canadians want to know is the Conservatives in the last election ran on a platform to cut $18 billion in infrastructure investments.
That's not true.
So what projects out of all of the projects we're talking about, can you tell us what projects you would cut? What projects would not go ahead? What community centers and what ridings across the country would not go ahead? What public transit projects wouldn't go ahead? What projects in Indigenous communities? What clean drinking water wouldn't go ahead? Because that's what Canadians want to know.
Thank you, Minister. Go ahead, Mr. Scheer. I have a point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm having a bit of difficulty trying to hear what the minister is trying to say, and I would appreciate if my colleagues across would allow the minister to complete the response.
Thank you, Mr. Iacono. Thank you. Minister, if you just complete quickly, because Mr. Scheer only has about a minute left. Go ahead.
Look, I think it's really important, these investments we're making across the country. I go talk to mayors across the country, Indigenous communities, and they're making a huge difference. That whether it's clean drinking water or it's investments in public transportation or in community or cultural centers, I could go on. And these are projects that are critically important. I would hope that the member would support these investments because, you know what, they're not just good for communities. They're good for tackling climate change, and they're also good for creating jobs and growth.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Scheer?
Yeah, well, this minister knows that it is her department that has let billions of dollars lapse. Our commitments was in the last election was for the same amount of infrastructure dollars being spent. This government has let those monies lapse. The Auditor General flagged that most of the projects that are being completed today are from the previous Conservative government's legacy program. So she's trying to put her name on our homework and get credit for it. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has flagged that there's been no private sector investment in Canadian infrastructure bank projects. missing projects, no tracking of whether or not the programs are even hitting their own targets. So, this minister is coming to Parliament for approval for new spending for the next cycle, and she hasn't been able to track the money that she's already been given.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Minister, short response. You're on mute.
I might just remind the member of projects that have been invested in his riding. The town of Ituna water distribution and supply, the new water, wastewater mains and pump station upgrades, the lagoon expansion and new lift station, drinking water treatment systems in the village of Albernithi, the Musco-Papatung Hill reconstruction, the Ituna asset management, the in the rural municipality of Indian Head, number 156 investments. I could go on. Maybe the minister,
and those are mostly from previous conservative programs.
Thank you, Minister.
I can provide the list. We'll come back to the member with his list of investments.
Thank you, Minister McKenna, and thank you, Mr. Scheer. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. Mr. Rogers, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. Good to see you again at our committee, and look forward to this meeting today. I'm splitting my time with my good colleague, Mr. Iacono. So I'll just ask the one question for the minister to respond. Minister, we're in the depths of a health and economic crisis. And I know the last time you appeared at this committee, you mentioned that you had adapted streams under the Investing in Canada infrastructure plan to the realities of COVID-19. Can you provide an update on these important investments and how they are impacting communities now and for the years to come?
Minister.
Well, thank you very much. Congratulations, Canada Games. I think that I heard that you guys are getting it. That's pretty awesome. I think that'll mean some infrastructure investments and also some good news in across Newfoundland and Labrador. Look, when the pandemic hit, it was pretty clear to me that we needed to adjust our programs, that we needed to make sure that we were providing support to provinces and municipalities, sometimes in areas that we don't normally fund. So we created the COVID-19 stream, which allowed provinces and territories to allocate 10% of their money under the Invest in Canada infrastructure program to things like investing in schools and in long-term care and in hospitals in ventilation. We don't normally do that. That's provincial jurisdiction, but obviously critically important investments. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we announced, or maybe it was last week, I think in the pandemic, I lose track of time, but we announced investments in schools across Ontario to improve ventilation. That's critically important. I think we all recognize that. We need kids to be back in school, but we need it to be safe. We invested in public long-term care facilities in Ontario. Also, we've seen the huge challenges there, but it also means investments in active transportation, in projects that mean that people can get out in nature. We recognize that's critically important. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we also doubled the gas tax, the Building Canada Communities Fund, to support municipalities directly. We know that they need money. It has been expensive and challenging time through COVID-19, but we want them to continue building infrastructure. So we're going to continue making investments that will help Canadians get through COVID-19, help municipalities and provinces, but of course, then build back better.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Rogers.
Thanks, Chair. And over to my colleague, Mr. Iacono.
Merci,
Thank you, colleague, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. I'm not surprised that the former leader of the Conservative Party is criticizing our investments in infrastructure, because his argument during the campaign in 2019 was to stretch our programs out over 3 years and cut $18 billion. I repeat, $18 billion. This would have involved a delay in infrastructure programs throughout Canada. So I don't think that we need to learn much from him today. Madam Minister, as a Member of Parliament, we're aware of all the pressure placed by COVID-19 on municipalities since the beginning of the crisis. Our government has supported them, and we want to provide additional support to them by means of the gas tax fund. Could you give us clarifications on that initiative as well as the schedule for the implementation of that measure? Thank you.
Minister.
Alors,
Well, thank you very much to my colleague. Of course, we are aware how important it is to invest in infrastructure. As you pointed out, it is quite difficult for municipalities now. We are aware that the investments done by municipalities are very important, and this is why we have doubled our investments in the gas tax fund, as I mentioned. It has a different name now, which I think is a lot better. I'm not sure what it is in French. I'm sorry, the Canada Building Communities Fund. This is $1.36 billion, and it involves investments which will go directly to the municipalities. So it's different from our program of infrastructure, where we work in partnership with the provinces and territories. And when I talk to the mayors, they tell us they need money, they need funding for infrastructure. It makes a big difference in our communities, and we need to have the flexibility to make those investments. So I know that if you speak to the mayors of the municipalities, you know that there are a lot of important projects. And also last year, we announced about the funding. Normally, there are two components, but we put all of the funding into one component or one tier. So that's why it's important to listen to the mayors of the communities. What are their needs? And we support them, and we need them to invest in infrastructure, and we're going to make a huge difference for Canadians.
Mr. Iacona.
Madam Minister, I would just like to say, having spoken with mayors and municipal representatives, I can say that they've been very pleased in recent years. Not only have you provided that tax, but also it was doubled. And as you know, the huge assistance that this can provide, I'm very proud to say that I represent this government as well as my colleague, because we see the difference. And it's important to point out that 10 years before, there was not much infrastructure being built in my riding or in Laval. In particular, it's owing to our government that all of this was changed. Thank you once again. And thank you. I would just like to clarify, may I clarify that the doubling was actually $2.2 billion. So it's twice what we were doing before, and it is a lot of funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We're now going to move on to the block. Mr. Bressler-Deval, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for Ms. McKenna is that in the last budget, the government announced not far from $500 million for the high-speed train Quebec City-Toronto. I would like to know, out of that $500 million, how much will be spent between Montreal and Quebec City?
Minister?
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question. I hope that you appreciated the investments in the daycare. I know that I don't know how it's going with your child, but I hope that things are going well. Perhaps you have two now. But in any event, concerning the high-speed train, it's a very important project, and I've been working with the Minister of Transport and also with the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And so in the budget, as you've seen, we invested in the high-speed train. So it's very important. I recognize that it's very important between Montreal and Quebec City and all the stops. So this is in order for the project to be able to move forward. Thank you, Madam Minister. But my question was, what is the proportion of the $500 million that will be invested between Montreal and Quebec City? Well, I can actually tell you I don't know the exact amount. It's a major project, so it's for the project, but I'm sure that it's substantial, the part between Quebec City and Montreal. I understand that perhaps I'm a little bit surprised, though, because $500 million is a fairly substantial amount to want to know what is going to be done with it, with $500 million. But when I look at the comments from elected officials and the mayors and the chambers of commerce of the Mauricie region, they don't seem to be very pleased with the $500 million, because we all know that a high-speed train doesn't cost $500 million to build. It costs between $5 and $10 billion. So on your side, you're saying it's good news, but if we look at the mayors in Quebec and the chambers of commerce and industry in the Mauricie region and the Chamber of Commerce also in Three Rivers, the mayor of Three Rivers, everyone is disappointed with the government's announcement. Why are you the only person that's pleased with it? Well, I don't think they should be disappointed because it demonstrates our willingness for this project to move forward. I know that we're working very hard. The Infrastructure Bank is doing a large part of the work to see how we can get investment from the private sector. And also, of course, there is work to be done in order to work out the route and the technology. But it is a major project for Quebec, I know, and I know it's important also for all the people who live along the corridor as well as for the economy and for jobs. Madam Minister, do you know how many kilometers there are of railway that belong to Via Rail between Montreal and Quebec City? No kilometers. There's not one single kilometer of railway between Montreal and Quebec City. So what I'm wondering is how are you going to ensure that a high-speed train can be built with $500 million when everyone knows it won't work out? We understand that in addition to this $500 million, it's over 6 years. So there will not be any new investment over the next 6 years at $100 million per year. It's a high-speed trains for 2 elections. The Liberals have told us that it's coming, but finally we're believing it less and less, and we think that it's smoke and mirrors, and in 6 years there'll be 2027 and there'll still be no high-speed train. Well, I'm going to turn it over to my deputy minister because I know that she works very hard on that project with Transport, which is the lead in that field, Transport Canada, and also the Infrastructure Bank. So perhaps, Kelly, can you talk a bit about the project? Yes, thank you. In the budget, there was an amount for the office to continue the work in order to continue to work on the high-frequency rail. And also there was an amount of $500 million that was mentioned to continue the service of VIA, which will be appropriate to continue providing service, and it will be increased. It will increase the service levels for whatever type of project is advanced. First of all, yes, it's over 6 years, but it's really in order to have a bottleneck. There are connections to avoid a bottleneck. I understand what you're saying, but what I want to understand mostly is that the $500 million, it's $500 million that will be used to improve the service of Via Rail and might also perhaps help for the high-speed train, but ultimately it's not really a high-speed train that's being announced. It's a bit of money to do some retrofitting, but there's nothing between Montreal and Quebec City because there's no railway between Montreal and Quebec City. There is no high-speed train between Montreal and Quebec City. So that's what the mayors are asking for in the chambers of commerce, and that's what's been promised over the past 2 elections by your government, and yet we end up in a situation where in 2027 there will still be nothing. That's the reality of it, and I think that is why the elected officials in Mauricie and the chambers of commerce and all of Quebec is disappointed. And I have the impression that you had promised something and you're not providing it. Well, I can see that it's very important for the member, and it's a very important project, and it was mentioned in the budget, and we are advancing, we are making investments, and we're working hard on the project. And to really understand the technology and the exact routing and the costs and how we can get private sector funding. But I know that they're working very hard. There's an office between VIA, the Infrastructure Bank, Transport Canada, and Infrastructure Canada is working on that project.
We're now going to move on to the NDP. Mr. Bachrach, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back to our committee, Minister McKenna. I'd like to start with the Auditor General's recent report on the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. Her high-level findings on the program and its effectiveness are pretty troubling. I imagine they were frustrating for you to read. And I'll just read a sentence from the section entitled Overall Message. And she states that, quote, overall, Infrastructure Canada, as the lead department for the Investing in Canada plan, was unable to provide meaningful public reporting on the plan's overall progress towards its expected results. My question is how Canadians can trust that these massive investments are advancing the goals that you've laid out when even the Auditor General for Canada can't connect the dots?
Minister?
So that's a really important question because I've always said every dollar invested in infrastructure has to have multiple benefits from creating jobs and growth to tackling climate change and building more resilient communities to also increasing inclusivity and equity. And I think if you go to any community in this country and you go talk to the mayors of any of the communities about any of these projects, they'll explain to you how, electric buses in Brampton are going to, mean cleaner air, or they're going to mean Canadian jobs because they're built in Canada, or they're going to mean that people get home faster. But look, I agree. We need to do a better job of explaining outcomes. That's something I'm committed to. And I really do hope the member opposite, who I know cares greatly about infrastructure, but also achieving net zero emissions by 2050, will weigh in on Canada's first ever national infrastructure assessment. The whole point of that is to make sure that we use the best evidence, that we use data, that we are able to focus on outcomes and make sure that every investment we make in infrastructure is getting those multiple outcomes and that we're able to explain it more clearly to Canadians.
Mr. Bachrach?
Thanks for the response, Minister. Arguably, we shouldn't have to wait for the infrastructure assessment to improve the reporting so that Canadians don't have to go to every single mayor and ask whether the projects in their community are contributing towards the goals. But I'd like to move on to a slightly different topic. You have spoken very highly about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they show up in the Auditor General's report. Her finding was that although the department talked about these goals aspirationally and very positively in their visioning and in their messaging, they didn't show up. They weren't referenced in the department's reporting. And I do note that in the departmental plan, there's a reference in the text to the Sustainable Development Goals, but they aren't reflected in the actual indicators that the department tracks. Why not? If these Sustainable Development Goals are important and if they should guide our work, why not reflect those goals in the indicators that your department is tracking?
Minister?
So the Sustainable Development Goals are critically important, and my department reports, like all departments, on the Sustainable Development Goals in relation to the projects and the programs under their department, but they do it to ESDC. So I was actually involved as Minister of Environment and Climate Change. We had to report on Canada's progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, which actually includes progress of every level of government, so not just the federal government, but actually every community. Everyone has to weigh in. And as I say, I mean, in some ways, it is a little bit strange to put the onus on us. We actually have a department that is required to report, including to the UN, on how we are tracking progress in the Sustainable Development Goals. But my department does track our projects, how we're contributing to Sustainable Development Goals. But as I say, this reporting, the Auditor General's report, I think my deputy can explain how many departments, how many programs, how many projects. That's a separate type of reporting. But the reporting by the SDGs, we should be clear, is happening by our government, across government, for every department, to the United Nations, which is critically important.
Bachrach?
So I'm not quite clear. Are you arguing that your specific department, Infrastructure Canada, in its plan, contrary to what the Auditor General is saying, shouldn't have to report specifically on the Sustainable Development Goals?
Minister?
So my department reports on the Sustainable Development Goals on all the projects and programs within the Infrastructure Canada. But we have this broader reporting obligation on infrastructure projects generally. But to be clear, I don't know if I'm making this more confusing. We have to report as a government to the United Nations on across government, and that across government reporting is done through ESDC. They've been decided that they are the ministry responsible for doing that reporting. So it would be duplicative and very challenging for us to do it when you already have another department. But I think it's probably, I'll pass it over to my deputy. She can probably do a better job explaining.
Well, I don't want to spend too much time here because I only have 6 minutes. So on the topic of indicators, I did read through the departmental plan, and one of the indicators that shows up as an indicator of quality of life for all Canadians is gross domestic product attributable to infrastructure. is gross domestic product an accurate indicator of equitable quality of life improvement? It feels like an outdated portrayal of inclusive development. There are so many improved metrics that we can be using. Do you feel, Minister, that GDP should be one of only 3 indicators that is linked to quality of life improvement for all Canadians?
Minister? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I was going to say that's a really deep question. To the member opposite, I actually, there's certainly merits in GDP. Generally, we all know how important GDP growth is, but as you say, there are many measures that regular people would feel are more important to their quality of life. So something that maybe we should take back. Maybe my deputy. It's a very interesting question because I think sometimes, the world is changing and how we value and what we value is critically important, and it's changed. We never talked about net zero by 2050 as something that was critically important, or maybe the focus on making sure equity was the main focus was also something that we didn't think about as much before. But I think that's an interesting point. I will take that on board. Maybe I don't know if my deputy wants to say something.
Sure. So sustainable development growth indicator number 8 is good jobs and economic growth. So GDP is one facet of looking at that. And certainly as we look at infrastructure, that does contribute to economic growth and good jobs. So it's one lens of many that we do need to look at, and we do look at overall regarding our investments as well as the plan overall.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Thank you, Mr. McKenna. And thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Great question at the end there. I guess it would somewhat be subjective in terms of measuring the performance of any infrastructure investment based on what people's lifestyles are accustomed to. With that, we're now going to move on to our second round. And our second round starts off with the Conservatives. Mr. Scheer, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Canadian Infrastructure Bank was supposed to get private sector funds to build public infrastructure. Last week, this government announced through the CIP that it was giving $655 million of taxpayers' money to a company owned by Fortis Inc., a multi-billion-dollar company, to build a project that was already getting built anyway. Will the minister, simple question here, will the minister provide this committee with the details of the special deal they cut to Fortis Inc.?
Mr. McKenna?
Apologies if you hear my dog. My dog's like coming in and barking. Look, the Canada Infrastructure Bank is complementary to the Government of Canada's historic $180 billion investing in Canada Infrastructure Bank plan. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is independent. I will say that's a very good project that will lower emissions, that will also create good jobs for Canadians, and create economic opportunity. And to others who might think that we want to privatize infrastructure assets or sell assets, not the goal of the infrastructure bank. It's really to make sure that we bring that good projects go ahead, and that's really an opportunity that the bank is doing. They're investing in many different projects.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Go ahead, Mr. Scheer.
If it's such a good project, why couldn't Fortis Inc. pay for it itself? This is a company that made over $8.9 billion in revenue last year. They paid out over $800 million to their shareholders. And yet this government decided to cut a check of $655 million for a project that was already getting built anyway. The Lake Erie project has been proposed since 2014. So very simple question. Will the government provide this committee with the details of the special deal they just gave to Fortis Inc.?
Minister?
Well, I think the member opposite might know the Ontario Minister, Greg Rickford. I'll just read what he said. The Lake Erie Connector demonstrates the advantage of public-private partnerships to develop critical infrastructure that delivers great value to Ontarians. Connecting Ontario's electricity grid to the PJM electricity market will bring significant tangible benefits to our province. This new connection will create high-quality jobs, improve system flexibility, and allow Ontario to export more excess electricity to promote cost savings for Ontario's electricity consumers.
Will you table the details of the deal? Yes or no?
I'm happy. As you know, we have the CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. He's come to present before. and we're always able to provide information about any project.
This isn't about whether or not it's a good project. It's about who should pay for it. ITC Holdings is owned by Fortis Inc. Fortis Inc. made almost $9 billion in revenue last year. They paid over $800 million to shareholders in dividends. If this was such a good project, those shareholders, those investors could pay for it themselves. We are dealing in the aftermath and a current pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people have lost everything. They've been told they can't open their doors. They've watched their entire life savings disappear. Their businesses are on the verge of bankruptcy. And this government decided to give $655 million to a multi-billion-dollar organization, a multi-billion-dollar operation, private sector company that pays out over $800 million to their shareholders in dividends. Why?
Okay, let's just be clear that our government has supported Canadians through this pandemic, and we're going to continue to support Canadians. 80 cents out of every dollar is going to support Canadians. But let's also be clear of what the minister from Ontario, who happens to be a conservative, said, that this is going to mean jobs for Ontarians. This is going to be lower prices for consumers. This is going to be something that is good to tackle climate change. And you talked about this project. I'm not going to second guess the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It's independent, and I'm sure they can provide you the justifications. But this project, there's no evidence this project was going to go ahead, and it crowded in private sector investments. We need good projects to go ahead. I know that the member opposite does not believe in the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which is very surprising for someone that's a conservative that would believe that we should get more. Do you believe we should get more infrastructure built? Do you believe that we should crowd in the private sector to do that? Do you believe that the federal government does not have enough, can't fund every single dollar of infrastructure investment that we need to build the future we want?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Go ahead, Mr. Scheer.
Isn't it the case that this minister and the CEO of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank was so embarrassed about not being able to prove a single dollar worth of private sector investment that they went running out and found a project that was already getting built? ITC Holdings brags on its website that all that is needed is a few servicing agreements in the US to get this project built. This is a multi-billion-dollar organization. Canadians are losing everything they've ever worked hard for. And this government decided to give $655 million in corporate welfare. It's disgusting.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Mr. McKenna, short answer.
That's all wrong. And I would just
what have I said that's not true?
Mr. Scheer.
Everything that you said is not true.
You didn't give him $655 million?
Our focus has always been on getting more infrastructure built by crowding in the private sector, which is good for Canadians. And once again, I would just go back to the Minister of Energy for Ontario, who talked about the importance of this public-private partnership to get critical infrastructure built that brings greater value to Ontarians. That's jobs at a time that we need jobs. That's climate action at a time when we need climate action. That's lower costs to consumers at a time where I'm sure consumers appreciate lower costs. I'm not embarrassed by that. I think that is good.
Can you mute yourself, please? Minister, continue. You got give me about 5-10 seconds.
Look, I think that the Canada Infrastructure Bank has a really important role to get more infrastructure built. There's a limit to the dollars that the government has, that there is private sector that has money to invest in infrastructure that is good for Canadians. We're going to continue to do that by working with the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you, Minister. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. We have Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and Minister. It's wonderful to see you here with the Deputy Minister. Thank you both for being here and for all your work. I mean, what a time to be in the business of building communities in Canada right now, a generational investment in communities, reaching into cities and towns across the country, improving lives of current and future generations. Thank you for your leadership on this through the Infrastructure Bank, getting amazing traction and so many other great outcomes. So thank you for all of that. Now, I want to just ask you about active transportation today. As active transportation advocates like you and I have seen what's happened during COVID, communities have turned to active transportation in a new way of being outdoors in a safe way, of using public space in better and more interesting ways to get around their communities and to be healthy outdoors. Could you talk to us about the work that you're doing that is enhancing what Canadians want out of their active transportation futures?
Minister.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to my parliamentary secretary. I know you've worked so hard, and we launched Canada's first ever active transportation strategy, which is incredibly important. But we also created a separate fund for active transportation. That really is historic, and it's a recognition that when you build public transit, you need to be also thinking about how you get the people the extra mile so they can take public transit, whether they do it by cycling, or they do it by foot, or I don't know, electric bike or scooter or skateboard. And I think that there's been a real reflection and recognition by Canadians about how important active transportation is, how important it is to be able to get around in your own human power. I know when I go to municipalities across the country, rural or urban, they talk about how they want to have more cycling paths, how they want them to be safer, so that more people choose cycling, how they want to get people active, how there's health benefits. And so huge kudos to you. I know you've been doing a lot of outreach on the active transportation strategy. You're really the expert on this, and you did a really good job advocating with so many advocates across the country who recognize the importance of cycling, of active transportation, of people being able to get around, including if you're in a wheelchair. That we need to make things more accessible to everyone. And I'm really excited about this. I know there's a tons of excitement about the new active transportation strategy and fund that you're working on.
Okay, thank you for that. And that the government was able to buttress the active transportation strategy with the $400 million active transportation fund that we then engaged Canadians across the country to work on, what the criteria should be for that fund. I wonder if you could share with the committee a little bit about where you see that fund, $400 million landing in communities. What kind of projects?
Minister?
You're on mute there, Minister.
Yeah, she's trying to get off mute.
Okay.
It's like, hey, I'm clicking and it's not working. Look, I think that there's so many opportunities. I see that in my own community of Ottawa, where active transportation has made a real difference. 80% of Ottawans will live within 5 kilometers of the new LRT, but we need to get people those 5 kilometers, and we need to do it in a way that can get them there safely. When you think about communities across the country, they want people to be able to get around in active ways. A footbridge, what a difference it can make to connect communities, but also for people to think about how they're going to walk to school now, or they're going to ride their bike. So I think this is really about building communities around people. I might be stealing a line from the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, but we need cities built around people and not cars. Cars are, important. We're electrifying it, but we also need to be making sure that we have cycling paths, that we have other ways for folks to get around. And I know Canadians are excited about that, so we're going to continue down that route.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Chair. And of course, Secretary Buttigieg borrowed that line from the great urbanist Jan Gehl, who said, if you design a city for cars, you get a city full of cars. If you design a city for people, you get a city full of people. And that's what we're trying to do, trying to work, get Canadian communities to design themselves for people, to live actively, and all the benefits that come with that. GHG reductions, public health. The evidence shows that people live longer, healthier, happier, more productive lives when they're less sedentary and more active in their lives. So thank you for that. There's just about a minute left. One of the things we heard about repeatedly in our cross-country engagement was this idea of equity in the provision of active transportation. I wonder if you could just touch on that and who we're trying to reach here with these programs.
Quickly, Minister.
So equity is a really important consideration, that when we invest money in infrastructure, we need to make sure that it's invested for everyone and everyone gets an opportunity. I think equity needs to be looked at broadly. So of course, equity, if you're disabled, you should still be able to access cycling paths or walking, or active transportation of all sorts. But also that means investments in rural areas. Sometimes we forget about investing in rural areas. I hear that from rural areas all the time. They want to make sure that they're getting access to these investments. So I think there's a whole range of folks that you need to be thinking about. And my focus is that every investment we make improves the quality of life for all Canadians.
Thank you, Minister.
And I will say Indigenous peoples, we didn't have a chance, but that's somewhere where there's a historic gap, infrastructure gap, and we're working hard to address that as well.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I have to say, Mr. Fillmore, speaking like a true planner, an esteemed planner. So well done. We're now going to move on to the block. Mr. Barceau-Duval, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Minister of Infrastructure, in an interview by Jean-Yves Duclos on Radio Canada, he mentioned that 2, 3, or 4 years down the road, the government might decide to put some money back into Via Rail, or at least to signal that you still intend to do the high-speed train. Don't you think that when you have a government that believes in a project and commits to a project, that you don't drag it on for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but after 2 or 3 or 4 years, you start to see results? We've seen that in many other projects. But in the case of the high-speed train, it looks as though we're turning around in circles and that it's really a lead balloon. So could you just tell us, for how many elections do you intend to use the high-speed train, or do you want to just, as a platform, or do you want to just be honest and say we're not going to have it? You can read my mandate letter. It's very clear, and the mandate letter for the Minister of Transport, that the train, the high-frequency train, is part of our mandate. We invested $500 million in Via Rail for the project. So it's a project that is very important. As I said, there's some work to be done, and we need to determine the technology, the route, how much it's going to cost, the role of the infrastructure bank. But it is a very important project to our government. I have said this. Minister Duclos said it. Minister Champagne has said so. And Minister Agrawal said it too. And the Prime Minister said it. So I don't think that we can be clearer than that. Well, nor do I think you can be clearer in terms of the will to not really get it done, because this is what we see. Announcements are made here and there of peanuts here and there. Well, maybe not peanuts, but it's 500 million over a period of 6 years. It's very far from the amounts in studies that have been done for years. We can see clearly that there's no political will to move ahead on the part of the government on that. And I'm disappointed that your government is not honest enough to say that you no longer intend to do it, to move forward with it, and instead you announce bits and pieces here and there to try to keep it alive. But I find it very cynical, because the population, one day in 10, 15, 20 years, they're still going to promise this high-speed train on the part of the government. They won't believe it, and people get disenchanted. So I can't believe you keep doing that. Large infrastructure projects take time to plan because we want it to work well. But I acknowledge how important it is to the member. I know it's important for people from Quebec and Ontario and Canadians. We're spending money. $500 million is not nothing. But as I said, we need to plan it. It's important for a large project, and we are moving forward.
We're now going to move on to Mr. Bachrach for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I'd like to ask you a question about school districts. And as I'm sure you're aware, school districts face challenges when it comes to decarbonizing their operations. A couple of quick stories from my home province of British Columbia. The Greater Victoria School District renovated Vic High, the high school in Victoria, but instead of putting in a renewable energy heating and cooling system, they went with a gas furnace. And their argument was that there was insufficient funding made available. They declared a climate emergency in 2019. The Cowichan School District, likewise, they declared a climate emergency in 2020. They want to replace all their buses, school buses, with electric versions, and yet they were only able to secure funding for one school bus through the province. They would like to convert their entire fleet. Recently, you created a $1.5 billion program for building retrofits, whereby cities can access those funds directly without going through the provinces. Would you consider creating a similar program that would allow school districts to apply for funding from the federal government?
Minister.
Yeah, so it's good that you noted under the COVID-19 stream that we funded retrofits for schools. We don't normally do that, I'll be clear, because that's in provincial jurisdiction, and we certainly respect provincial jurisdiction, although the exception to that is school buses, that we have a commitment to 5,000 zero-emission buses, including school buses, which I think is a real opportunity. We do give money directly to municipalities through the renamed Gas Tax Canada Community Building Fund, but we do believe that there is an important role for the province to be funding schools and to be making those investments. We will step in certain cases, but look, to your broader point, I totally get it. That I think that we need everyone to be part of the solution on climate change. It was great to see BC's new Clean BC plan. I think that's a really great plan and a great example of a province that is committed to climate action and committed to increasing ambition. We just announced a new target, and we need new ambition across the board. But BC's really stepped up to do that, and I know how much folks care about this in BC, including kids at schools.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Bachrach, quick question.
Minister, last July, as part of the Safe Restart Agreement, your government provided $2 billion to support municipalities and $2.3 billion towards transit systems. We're now 9 months later. We're hearing from municipalities that are going to be running out of federal support for their operating costs. We're also hearing from transit authorities that are going to be struggling with the operating costs associated with transit. Are you willing to provide further emergency funding to get municipalities and transit systems through the pandemic?
Minister.
You were referencing the Safe Restart Agreement. That was a really important agreement with provinces and territories, including to flow money to municipalities, including to flow money to support operating expenses for municipalities. As we said, that we also doubled the Canada Community Building Fund, which is critically important. And when we announced the Safe Restart, we said that is a start, and we constantly reassess. The Prime Minister has been clear, we will always have the backs of Canadians, including Canadian municipalities. I feel like as Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, I am the minister that's the biggest cheerleader for municipalities. And I recognize a challenging time. As I say, we doubled the gas tax. We've been flowing money directly to municipalities, including the Community Buildings Fund, including a number of different initiatives. And we're going to continue providing the support. I can't provide details exactly right now on that, but I know that I have heard from folks how important that is.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. That brings us to 4:35. Mr. McKenna, thank you for your time today. Well done. And to all the members, thank you for your interventions today. Very well done. Mr. Clerk, do we need some time to do some sound checks, therefore having to suspend for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, we'll need to suspend for about a minute.
Fun Earth Day.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Mr. Clerk, if we, I'll suspend for a couple of minutes so we can do some sound checks for our witnesses for the second part of today's meeting. questioning. First off, we have witnesses from, once again, the Office of Infrastructure Canada. And with that, we have Ms. Gillis once again, Mr. or Ms. Bertrand, Mr. Campbell, Ms. O'Leary, and Mr. Peets. We're going to go right into the questions. I understand there's no presentations to be made. So with that, we're going to start off with, I believe we have Mr. Scheer starting us off in this round. Let me just double check here. Yes, we do. Mr. Scheer, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wonder if I could direct the officials' attention to the 2021-22 departmental plan. I've got a few questions as it relates to the targets and result indicators going back a few last few years. If we look on page, maybe we can start with page 11. Under the heading Plan Results for Public Infrastructure and Communities Investment, there is a departmental result indicator 2.1.2, number of transactions and amount of private investment in public infrastructure. The target is set at 250 projects. The date that the department has given itself to achieve that is March 31st, 2022, so a little less than a year away. And then all the years going back to 2017, the department says not available. Was this just not available at the time of printing? Could some officials shed light on how many projects short of the department's target they fell, or where they came in? I'm just looking for some clarity here as to why this information seems to be missing.
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The departmental reform plan for 2022 has new indicators. We looked at our infrastructure programming overall, and we looked at the types of indicators that we would like to track and monitor going forward. So that's why it's prospective on this type of report, that we haven't gone backwards in that regard. And when we look at the types of investments that we're making in infrastructure, although we are an investor overall, there are important types of procurements that support infrastructure, such as P3s and in different ways to bring in the private sector. And if you would like, I can have Glenn Campbell, who works on alternative financing, expand a little further.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, thank you, Deputy. So we look forward in successive years to monitor and track the impact that the change in approach toward bringing public infrastructure, particularly in attracting private sector capital, can promote and demonstrate the usage of alternative finance models. And there is quite a range of models now being deployed in Canada in the P3 space. And then, of course, those models where the Canada Infrastructure Bank and others are taking in a new direction. And I think there seems to be a lot of excitement in the Canadian market, and we really need new ways to track that impact. And I would note that Canada now, as a world leader in public-private partnerships, is approaching 300 active and planned projects in the space.
Thank you. Mr. Scheer?
I'm sure there's a lot of excitement from shareholders of multi-billion-dollar companies who now know that this government is going to give them hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate welfare. But there's certainly a lot of disappointment in the sense that there have been no projects completed under the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. But I just want to drill down here because you're talking about how the metrics have changed going forward, but the departmental plan actually looks backwards. It looks at 2017, 2018, 2018, 2019. Surely you should be able to tell this committee you may be changing the metrics going forward, but as of today, you had set yourselves a target of 250 projects with private sector investment. You could surely give us an update today as how many of those, where you landed, how many projects were you able to achieve towards your 250 project goal?
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a target for 21-22 that we are just beginning. We're actually in the first month of 21-22, and looking at this particular year, and these are not actually projects regarding the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That is a separate independent crown that does their own monitoring, their own reporting. This is looking at our contribution funding, and when we're contributing and looking at the market overall, what are we allowing for and supporting in the market through other proponents who are the owners of the infrastructure that we will be looking at and working with proponents and trying to understand the different alternative funding models that can bring projects to bear. So it is not the Canada Infrastructure Bank. This is through our funding and our programming
Right,
that
I
we're
understand.
looking at and
I
supporting.
totally understand that. And as I mentioned, I'm looking at the department's departmental plan. Looking back, I'm reading off your own departmental plan. It says 2017, 2018 actual result, and then it says not available. Can you tell this committee how many projects towards the 250 project goal this department was able to achieve?
Ms. Gillis.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, this is a new indicator that we are prospectively going to monitor going forward. We did not go backwards and look at an indicator and say, okay, behind, 4 years ago, what happened? So it is something that we are going to be monitoring going forward.
Well, with all due
Thank
respect,
you.
this government was formed in 2015. This is the departmental plan that it set for itself the target of 250 projects. I understand you might be changing it going forward, but you must be able to tell this committee. I'm reading from your sheet. This isn't my subjective analysis here. You have a column that says 2017, 2018 actual result. You must be able to track this. How many projects towards your own 250 project goal were you able to achieve to complete?
Ms. Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as I said, this is a new indicator that we will prospectively be tracking going forward. There is no requirement in these particular reports as you change the indicator to go backwards and re-examine the data from several years ago to see what would have been. But going forward, we will be tracking and looking at what that particular indicator tells us. Thank you.
Do I have any time left? I was just going to delegate to my colleague Michael Cram wanted to.
Actually, you have like 5 seconds left, so we'll call this one. We'll stop this one for now. Now 3 seconds. Sorry, Andrew. Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Thank you, Ms. Gillis. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. I believe Ms. Jacek is splitting her time with Mr. El-Khoury. Ms. Jacek, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair, and indeed I will be splitting my time. Since the subject of the Canada Infrastructure Bank has come up through the course of this afternoon, I thought members of committee might be interested at the Industry, Science and Technology Committee this morning. I'm a member of that committee as well. Spontaneously, a business person from Banff, Alberta, spoke about their interaction with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and though I know it is independent from Infrastructure Canada, that business person was exceedingly complimentary as to the process and also the lack of red tape, and because that's actually what we're studying at that particular committee. And so members may want to consult Hansard to see that testimony. My question for Ms. Gillis is, the minister alluded to the COVID-19 resiliency stream investing in areas that are traditionally provincial in scope, in other words, in schools, in long-term care, to improve ventilation. Could you give us more detail on those projects, maybe some dollar amounts? I would be particularly interested in hearing how much Ontario received for through that particular stream.
Ms. Gillis.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So as the minister mentioned, when we revised the integrated bilateral agreement program last summer, we allowed for up to 10% of the allocations to provinces and territories for them to take the option to transfer money into this particular new stream. So Ontario could transfer just over $1 billion and has. So they are looking at, and what was announced last week was 95 long-term care facilities looking at ventilations and improvements to the quality of their building for living in the COVID context that we are right now. They also announced hundreds of improvements to schools across the country across the province for, again, ventilation and HVAC systems, to the tune of about $656 million, quite significant. And they continue to look at projects and working with us to have investments in this area. Now, traditionally, we don't invest in schools and long-term care and social kind of facilities like that. But with the context that we're living in right now, felt that was very important and relevant that we could do something in the near term to make a difference for the environmental kind of aspects that we're working through right now.
Thank you so much. Mr. El-Khoury.
Mr. El-Khoury, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share the same opinion concerning the respect and appreciation of the Minister for the good work she is doing. The people of Laval appreciate this tremendously, and I can say that on several occasions the Mayor of Laval himself, Mr. Maldemers, said in presence of my colleague that he is satisfied with the investment of our government, particularly in the area of infrastructure. So thank you once again. Ms. Gillis, Canada has an infrastructure deficit, and although our Conservative colleagues would prefer to make cuts, we are rethinking the way that we carry out infrastructure projects in this country. Can you explain why a national evaluation of infrastructures is so essential at this stage? Thank you for the question. When we look at the needs in infrastructure, we often hear about the needs and the different choices that we need to make for investments and the deficit that you just mentioned. And we need to make choices with public funding. And with that, we need data and information and intelligence to make the right decisions. And that's the reason why the minister has decided to conduct a consultation all around the country with all the people who are involved with infrastructure to have a nationwide conversation in order to really discuss what infrastructure we need, how we can collaborate differently between different levels of government and the owners of infrastructure, and how can we finance and get the funding we need to pay for the infrastructure that we need. First of all, this is something which has already been done in England and other countries, and it's an important conversation for a plan for the future towards 2050. Ms. Gillis, thank you. We know that climate change is real and that it has an impact on our country from one ocean to the other. And in my riding, the members of the community want clean and practical public transit. Can you inform us and inform the committee about the initiatives that you propose to offer Canadians transportation options for public transit that is more ecological? Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Just a little over a month ago, the Prime Minister and the Minister announced $15 billion in programming, and there are different components to that program. For major transportation projects in cities, such as LRTs and subways, that we need in order to have mobility for those who live in large cities and to reduce the use of automobiles, and also to have transportation for people who cannot have a car, and to have also active transportation which can be used for health and when we don't need to use an automobile, and different projects that health is and safety are considerations along with other modes of transportation. And for the climate, to have the investments on buses with net zero and reduced emissions by using public transit.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gillis. I have to move on, and thank you, Mr. Alcuri, and thank you, Ms. Jancek. The members of the committee, I was going to continue on down the list from the first round into the second round, but when I look at our timing and having to at least take 10 minutes to look at the main estimates and the votes attached to the same, What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down the list from the second round. Mr. Iacono, I'm going to have to bump you into another section with Mr. Fillmore and proceed from there. I'm doing this in respect of time. Hopefully you don't mind. I wanted to get to Ms. Jastic and give her an opportunity to speak because she's not until down the list, and others that are on the list, including Mr. Barstow-Duval and Mr. Backrack, so I can get them their time in as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Mr. Barstow-Duval for 6 minutes, followed by Mr. Backrack, and that'll be followed by Mr. Soroka, over to Mr. Fillmore, and I'm asking Mr. Fillmore if he can split his time with Mr. Iacono so we can get that satisfied, and then we're going to be tight on time from there. So, Mr. Barstow-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question for you, Ms. Gillis, is perhaps concerning a program that you announced on April 14th, not very long ago. You announced $1.5 billion to stimulate construction, ecological construction, to do retrofitting of and new upgrades of public buildings such as libraries and community centers and so on. So I asked my assistants to write to your office to get details on that program, and we still haven't gotten an answer. So I'd like to know whether you can give us an explanation of what the problem is, not the problem, but the program, sorry, because when we went to look at the government site and the program, we couldn't see it. So I know that often happens that the programs are announced by press releases, but there are no details available, and there's no way for municipalities or organizations to apply to them. So could you please explain that program and also explain what we need to do to get information on programs when you announce them? Yes, thank you very much for the question. First of all, the program is $1.5 billion, as you mentioned. It is a program for communities that they can apply for directly with Infrastructure Canada. And the goals are really to have inclusivity, to invest on public buildings, the other types that people need in communities that perhaps they don't have that type of service, such as a community center in one place that might not have a community center. And to make the investments in a manner so as to reduce emissions. So if it's a new building, then it's net zero as a standard. And if it's a retrofit, then it's to reduce the emissions in the building, at least so as to make a difference. I understand the principle of the program, but the question was, how do we go about applying for the program if it's not posted anywhere on the government website with no criteria or information on how to obtain that or to submit an application for a project? We're going to share with the committee clerk all the information, because the information is available and has been made public on our website. And so we will share that information directly with the clerk. Thank you. Perhaps I didn't look in the right place, but you'll understand that there are a lot of programs and sometimes it's hard to find one's way around. So I hope I'm the one who is mistaken in that regard, because it's not the first program where I've had trouble finding the information once it's been announced, unfortunately. I don't understand why once a program is announced, it doesn't come out right away with information on how to apply, with a link at the bottom or with documents attached to it. It seems to me that would be the right way to handle it. Perhaps another question I have for you as well, which I had taken note of, and I'm going to try to find it. Just excuse me. So you invested, you're saying that the Auditor General, for example, noted that in the Canada Investment Plan, there are amounts allocated recently. We're talking about 20% of the expenses allocated, and the consequence was that the amounts were carried forward to future years. So sometimes amounts are announced, but they're not fully spent. So what are you going to do so that the amounts are paid out within the time period to avoid re-announcing the same money in the future? So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It is a very important question because in our profiles for our estimates, we truly use forecasts of projects that we work with the communities for the projects that are already approved. So sometimes if we need to reprofile the funding because there are delays in the projects, and that's not under our control. It's really controlled by the communities or provinces or those who manage the projects and the owners.
Interrupting, but I believe we're getting the translation or the interpretation at the same volume as the original language. At least I am.
Okay, we'll take a second. Mr. Clerk, can you check into that, please?
Sorry, Ms. Gillis.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Chair, it's I believe it was potentially caused by if Miss Gillis is speaking French but using the English channel, it may cross over. So if you're going to be speaking both languages, it's best to select 4. Otherwise, yeah, it can cause a little issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Ms. Gillis, can you continue?
Wait.
Yes, first of all, if we look at our funds, what we need to do is to look at what are the forecasts for the project and then allocate the funding according to this year in which it applies. And if I look at, we are now managing 5,000 projects that we're injecting funding into for the projects for community transit. For 3 projects, that's $500,000 that we need to reprofile the funds for future years in order to make sure that we have the funding in our commitments. Thank you. I have another question for you concerning the study. Yes, it'll be brief, Mr. Chair. Actually, the chair of the Federation of Quebec Municipalities, representing 1,000 municipalities in Quebec, mentioned that we're coming back to the former gas tax format to finance community centers that you announced you would finance through a different fund. I'm trying to understand. I'd like to know whether you intend to, because I've asked the question several times and things have been said, but do you intend to listen to that demand from the municipalities? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. For the gas tax inputs, it's set up until 2024, and it'll be renewed after that, and we'll have discussions over that. And then at that time, we'll be able to see whether there will be another category of investments. But community centers that we need in our communities now, we do have a program with $1.5 billion that can be used now, and also bilateral agreements for funding community centers.
Thank you, Mr. Barceau-Duval. We're now going to move on to Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Gillis, for being here today. My first question is regarding the climate lens for infrastructure investments. I wonder if you could tell us how many infrastructure projects have received approval by your department pending a climate lens assessment?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So at this point in time, we've had 173 projects approved through using the climate lens, representing 85% of the funding that's been approved. As I believe the member is aware, it's for projects over $10 million and those applicable within the green stream. Of the 173 projects, those have gone through an assessment. Some have been deferred, and we've had this conversation before. And of the deferrals, actually, they've been going through that particular process, and 13 of them have completed the climate lens and have met that particular condition. Because all of our programs that require a climate lens, any of the approvals that we give are conditional on completing what's required.
So, Ms. Gillis, have any project approvals that are conditional on completing the climate lens, have any of those approvals been withdrawn based on the result of the climate lens assessment?
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. The climate lens have been submitted to us and do go through a quality assurance and due diligence process. And we work very closely with communities and provinces across the country and understanding kind of what the requirements are, sharing guidance with what the climate lens requirements and steps are, including having the expertise appropriately to complete the actual assessment.
I guess the reason I asked the question is because my understanding is that the climate lens assessment was meant to guide your department's decision making around investments so that those investments went into projects that drove down emissions. Now, if the assessment process is being done retroactively after the project is approved, it's hard to see how that assessment guides the decision-making process. It's describing the emissions impact of the project, but that's not the most important aspect of the climate lens, arguably. But my question, Ms. Gillis, is in the budget, there's $36 million to develop a new climate lens methodology. I'm wondering what the scope of that initiative will be and what lessons your department takes from its current climate lens that will inform that process.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the funding in the budget is for Environment Canada and Climate Change Canada to look at a broader applicability of the climate lens as we look at our commitments to net zero 2050 and reducing emissions as we move forward into 2030. So having a broader applicability than Infrastructure Canada or even just infrastructure. And certainly when we look at the climate lens, it was about behavioral changes and understanding kind of how do you build projects differently. So it was part of the project approval process and bringing in different understandings of doing things differently than the business as usual. That said, we also have been investing it with the National Research Council in more resilient material and also, working with the Standards Council of Canada to, again, look at building in the north more resiliently, and NRCan looking at net zero types of materials, working with National Research Council. So other things to bring upstream opportunities that go beyond the investments of project-specific opportunities that we've been looking at.
Mr. Bachrach?
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Ms. Gillis, in Budget 2021, it was noted that $17.6 billion in new funding was being earmarked for green recovery, yet the Globe and Mail did an analysis and they could only count up $8.75 billion. Could you explain the $17.6 billion figure and what spending is a part of that figure as green recovery?
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. For the budget overall, which was an extensive budget, I can talk about Infrastructure Canada's commitments in there, and so the important parts of what we're doing and contributing to the Enhanced Climate Plan. So the $1.5 billion green and inclusive building that was part of the Enhanced Climate Plan is an important commitment in advancing what we can do in climate. But the actual individual programs that all lead within the budget itself, I don't have an itemized list, beside me at this point in time.
Ms. Gillis, turning to the departmental plan under the planned results for public infrastructure, communities, and rural economic development policy on page 8, the departmental result identified as infrastructure improves the quality of life for all Canadians. One of the indicators, 1.2.3, reads GHG emissions per capita in current year less 0.000085 megatons, brackets 2005 reference year. and the target is less than 0. I read this over several times trying to understand what it meant. Could you explain it in simple terms?
So,
Ms.
so,
Gillis?
so thank you. As we, Mr. Chair, as we look at GHG investments per capita, we are, reducing our investments overall, or looking at investments to reduce our GHG. And I will ask my colleague Gerard Peets to go through that particular indicator.
A brief comment, Gerard. We're over time.
I will say that our programs measure GHG impacts based on baseline, and as the Environment Canada's processes factor in economic growth and measure infrastructure investments as compared to a standard of economic growth. As to the specifics of the question, we'll have to get back.
Thank you, Mr. Peets. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Thank you, Ms. Gillis. We're now going to move on to our next set of questions. Mr. Soroka, you have 5 minutes. You have the floor.
With Mr. Cram as well.
Sure.
This government always seems to be focused primarily on how much money they can spend and how fast they can spend it. We see this in the federal budget and we see this within the department. However, if the only metric for success is how much money the government can spend, since the other ones are being revitalized, then it appears the government is falling on that front too. The recent Auditor General's report said, and I quote, "We found that the programs contributing to the Investing in Canada plan were not spending their allocated funding on projects as quickly as planned." I am hoping you could elaborate on the reason why the money is not getting out the door as fast as government would like.
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we look at the overall plan, which does involve 21 departments, 93 programs, and 12 years, we've just completed our 5th year, so just at 40%. And we have, as a government overall, committed $81 billion. And as at the end of January, $48 billion has been paid related to those commitments. So, and that relates to a whole host of different, programs and services related to infrastructure. If I concentrate just on our own types of infrastructure investments that we do know are making a difference in communities, we've invested in 1,100 community centers across the country. We are investing in the light rails in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Toronto.
Okay,
So those are the
Mr.
important
Vance,
investments
with
that are
short of
making a
time, we're
difference.
going to have to go to Mr.
Thank you, Ms.
Cram
Gillis.
then.
Go ahead, Mr. Soroka.
No, I'll pass it over to Mr. Cram now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cram, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses from the Office of Infrastructure Canada for joining us today. Back in February, there were 17 members of Parliament, including myself and Mr. Fillmore, who signed a letter in support of Ronald McDonald House Charities. The letter was sent to the Minister of Finance and CC to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, as well as the Minister of Health and the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. The letter explained that Ronald McDonald House Charities provides accommodation, meals, peer support, and many other services to take care of an entire family while their child is being treated in a nearby hospital. And Ronald McDonald House Charities was looking to expand their network of houses and services across Canada. Maybe I missed it in the recent budget, but I didn't see anything in the budget for Ronald McDonald House Charities. So was their request formally denied or just kind of ignored?
Ms. Gillis?
ماجدة ما حقدر أطول بس حبيت أخبرك
Mr. Alkuri, can you mute yourself, please?
بالنسبة
Mr. Alkuri, can you mute? Thank you. Ms. Gillis, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the question. And I would have to look into that particular letter because I'm offhand not aware of that particular request.
Mr. Cram?
All right. So in just more general terms, then, if you could provide some friendly advice to Ronald McDonald House Charities about how they could qualify for funding, if they had, perhaps promised to put solar panels on the Ronald McDonald House or something like that, would that perhaps make them qualify for some of the funding announced in this week's budget?
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you for the question. As we look at nonprofit organizations and opportunities for the services that they provide, depending on the program, they may be eligible. So I would be happy to have a conversation with them to understand more about what their opportunity is and direct them into the right place, whether it's our programming or other programming within the federal government.
Mr. Cram?
Okay, well, it certainly was a disappointment to see that they were not included in this week's budget. I don't think I have enough time left to get into too many other details, so I will just leave it at that. And thank you to the witnesses, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cram. We'll now move on to our next set of questions. We have Mr. Fillmore, and I'm asking that Mr. Fillmore try and split his time with Mr. Iacono as we're trying to fit everybody in here. So, Mr. Fillmore, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. And to Mr. Cram, I'll just say thank you. The letter was a very good letter, and I know that Ronald McDonald House is seeking enhanced funding across the country. They are getting projects funded. They got one funded in my riding here in Halifax, for example. So thank you for raising, and we can follow up. We can follow up later. Ms. Gillis, first of all, I wanted to thank you and your team for all your incredible hard work and dedication. Because of your work, there are Canadians across the country who have jobs. There are communities across the country that are having their infrastructure renewed. So thank you sincerely to you and your team for helping that to happen. When we look at the 10-year agreement that the Conservatives signed on the gas tax fund in 2014, it does not require provinces to provide detailed reporting on each project or its outcomes. So in that context, I'm saddened to see that the Conservatives are trying to drum up false claims, as we heard in the first hour, that there are missing projects. So I know it took a lot of work for you to correct the lack of reporting in the Conservative programs. I'm wondering if you can clarify this point, that there are in fact no missing projects and that they're all accounted for.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I can indeed confirm that there are no missing projects, and we have provided the PBO with a full accounting of the projects. At the time, there was 52,000. Now there are 67,000 because every day there are new projects that are approved, and that we worked with the 21 departments to provide the information to the parliamentary budget officer. And I can go further and say that we do have a funding table on our website with all of the programs for the $188 billion. And in the Auditor General paragraph 9.4, she says and quotes from there about the project list and the funding table, and saying that it does provide a full accounting for the plan. So there is no question that we have been able to report on the full plan and provide the information to the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General. That said, there are different levels of information that are available, like like the gas tax, that we don't get the same level of detail as other programs that apply directly to us or other federal departments.
Mr. Fillmore?
Thank you for that, Ms. Gillis. And Chair, I'll yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Mr. Iacono, you have the floor.
Yes.
Thank you, colleagues. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Since 2015, $430 million have been invested by the government in Laval in order to improve our transportation, our roads, or our water mains. Bravo. But we know that in 2014, the Conservative government brought the financing from the Canada Project TRAN of $1.7 billion to $210 million. So a reduction for the period 2014-2015. On the other hand, the Canada Infrastructure Bureau plans to make considerable contributions, more than $2 billion, therefore an increase to finance the components of the new Canada Project Fund. Could you please explain why it's necessary to increase these amounts and what will they be used for? Madame Gillis.
You're on mute.
Merci beaucoup pour la question, Mr.
Thank you for the question. When we need infrastructure, we need to make substantial investments for communities. As regards the question, this was for the communities. We look at the programs and to have the opportunities for new programs, such as green buildings for the communities, and to make applications directly to have investments in the buildings that they need. And it's important to continue to have this program that is relevant for the communities today and for the future. Thank you. I have a few other little questions. Tell me, regarding the needs, because I'm citing the needs for infrastructure, which you just mentioned. This infrastructure, the needs that we had in the past, yesterday, let's say infrastructure needs that existed yesterday, have those needs increased as of now, and why so?
Merci.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. When we look at the needs in infrastructure, the fundamental aspects of it for a good quality of living, when we look at the needs and the complexity of infrastructure, as we've already discussed, such as climate aspects, to make the necessary investments in buildings differently with the changes in the environment, that we have to take into consideration how we invest, how the projects go forward, in order to make sure that they can be in place for future years. And when we look at the number of people living in large cities, we have problems of congestion. We need to invest in public transit. We need to invest to ensure that Canadians have the infrastructure in place for their day-to-day lives. Things like that that are so important for all, every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gills. Thank you, Mr. Iacono. Members, we have 519 and we have the bells going right now. First off, I'll need unanimous consent to proceed. Do I have unanimous consent? We're good? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to be very tight here on time. I'm going to try and squeeze in the block and the NDP for their last 2.5-minute segments. And then I'm going to go into the votes for the Ways and Means, and hopefully they'll only take one vote. And then we can meet the time that we have allowed available for us or remaining. So with that, Mr. Barrasso-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't have any comments to make for this section.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrasso-Duval. Mr. Bachrach, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I thought we were only just having the single round. It sounded like our time was going to be cut tight there. So I'm caught a little bit off guard. Perhaps
if you want, Mr. Bachrach, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we go to the vote first and see if we can get the votes out of the way? And if we have time remaining, then I'll come back to you and Mr. Barrasso-Duval. Does that sound fair?
It sounds fair, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. I will now go to the vote on the main estimates. I will call out, I'm hoping that we can just do this in one vote, members. And I guess you can let me know that after I finish reading them. So under the main estimates, 2021, 2022, shall vote 1 under the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority carry. Secondly, shall vote 1 under the Canada Transportation Agency carry. Thirdly, shall votes 1, 5, and 10 under Department of Transport carry. Shall vote 1 under Marine Atlantic Inc. carry. Shall votes 1, 5, and 10 under Office of Infrastructure of Canada carry. Shall vote 1 under the Federal Bridge Corporation Limited carry. Shall vote 1 under the Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridges Inc. carry. Shall vote 1 under Via Rail Canada Inc. carry. Shall vote 1 under Windsor Detroit Bridge Authority carry. And finally shall report the same to the House. Members, your pleasure to this. One motion, or did you want to split it up? One motion is fine. I'm seeing
one
people
motion
there.
is fine, Chair. Pardon me.
Thank you. Ms. Kuzi, did you want to move that?
Move that one motion is fine?
No, move all of them.
No, I will not move all of them,
okay.
But yeah, thank you. I move that one motion is fine.
Okay, that's fine. Do I have a mover for all of them?
I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Questions or comments on the motion as outlined No questions or comments? Mr. Clerk, if you can call the vote, please.
Yeah, Mr. Fillmore.
In favor.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Pour, en faveur.
Miss Jacek.
In favor?
Mr. Rogers.
In favor?
Monsieur Iacono.
En faveur.
Mr. Cram.
In favor?
Miss Kusi.
In favor?
Mr. Shipley. Mr. Shipley.
Sorry, in favor?
Mr. Soroka.
In favor?
Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Cool.
And Mr. Backrack.
In favor?
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you, members. So we have that out of the way now. Mr. Barcelou Duval, did you want the floor for 2.5 minutes? And if not, I'm going to go to Mr. Backrack. Mr. Barcelou Duval?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Indeed, as Mr. Backrack mentioned, I didn't think there would be any additional turns to speak, so I didn't prepare any questions, but nevertheless, I do have one for Ms. Gillis, if she's still with us, concerning the last question I asked about the gas tax, because she told me that it would not be possible to answer my question about the municipalities of Quebec that would like to ask for a readaptation so that projects that were eligible in the past continue to be eligible, because the agreement ended in 2024. So, in fact, for their applications, we don't need to reopen the agreement. It's a question of interpretation. It's an interpretation of the criteria that changed and not the criteria themselves. So I would like to return with that question. Would there be some possibility for the government to make an examination of that request, which is a recurrent demand that's unanimous in Quebec?
Merci pour la
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. For the federal government, we have not changed the agreement, and we have not changed the interpretation. So if there are any specific questions, we could always discuss it with our colleagues in the Quebec department or in order to discuss it. But Quebec have their own program, and we have our own program. So I don't know whether it might be the Quebec program, perhaps, where there is a change. But in our case, we apply the program that we have, which started in 2005 or 2004 and will wind up in 2024. Well, listen, the information I have is that it's on the federal side that things are blocked. I understand that it's possible that on the Quebec side, they may say that it's Ottawa, and Ottawa says that it's in Quebec, but the municipalities are telling me that it's in Ottawa, so I imagine that they mustn't be mistaken. And what they're telling me, in fact, is that the program has not changed. The criteria have not changed, but what has changed is how they're applied, because in the past they could use that for certain things at the city hall that they can't use it for anymore. And this is a major program in small municipalities, and I think it's important, and it should be examined on your side.
Ms. Gillis?
Merci.
Thank you for that question, and we will certainly look into it and make sure that our communication is clear, because we have not changed our agreement nor our application of the agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Thank you, Mr. Barcelou Duval. We'll now move on to the NDP. Final speaker, final questions. Mr. Backrack, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gillis, your department has a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 10 megatons through infrastructure investments. Could you provide an update on where your department is at with regard to reaching that goal?
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are 28% of the way through reaching that particular goal, and we have still significant funds remaining to be committed within our program, within the green stream, and overall to continue making progress.
Mr. Bachrach?
Ms. Gillis, are there any technical reasons why the permanent transit fund does not kick in until 2026?
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the integrated bilateral agreements will be, completing in the 27-28 timeframe, and we've got the funding right now from the $15 billion that was announced by the Minister and the Prime Minister just over a month ago, which will include both bridge funding for those, large transit projects that are advanced and will not be will need required funding between now and 2026, as well as the other streams that we talked about, rural, active, and ZEBs. So, and then we will be doing an extensive consultation on the permanent public transit that will begin in 2026.
Mr. Bachrach?
If I'm clear, the consultation on the permanent transit fund is going to begin in 2026. Okay.
Sorry, we will begin a consultation later this year on the permanent public transit for that particular program to begin in 2026. And in the meantime, we do have the integrated bilateral agreements, and we do have the money that in the funds that were announced just over a month ago.
Mr. Chair, one more really quick question for Ms. Gillis. Why is there a decline of $1 billion in the departmental estimates?
So if we look at the overall funding, I'm just going to get the amounts. The estimates for the grants and contributions are down by just over $1 billion, and those estimates for our grants and contributions are based on working with provinces and territories with projects that have been approved and understanding the cash requirements that would be needed for it to satisfy those particular projects. And the main difference, if we look at the details of the exact programs, has been a payout under the programs from Budget 2016 for our clean water and wastewater, as well as our public transit infrastructure fund.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach, and thank you to all members today and all the witnesses. Mr. McKenna and her entire team, thank you for coming out and giving us your time today. Great meeting, lots to be chatted about, and a lot of great answers. With that, and before I adjourn, I do want to remind members, as I did last meeting, that we would also like to take a moment and speak to you about the reports that were distributed that we have through for the aircraft certification study. Once again, if members have any suggestions or edits, it would be very helpful if you can submit those to the clerk so that we can have them in writing in both official languages for when the committee begins consideration of that draft report. Along the topic of reports, the analysts will soon be drafting the report on the study of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It would also be helpful for the analysts if members can submit their drafting instructions to the clerk before that happens. So with that, I'm hoping for those that didn't submit yet would, again, to expedite these processes through the committee stages, so that way we can fit some more studies in, and with that, fit some more reports in. So members, once again, thank you. And it's my pleasure now to adjourn. Enjoy. We'll see you next Tuesday.